Chinese president is setting an example when it comes to environmental protection by personally joining a tree planting in Beijing today.
The world laughed when the first saplings went into the sand, but China kept digging, planting, and testing. Wind howled, dunes shifted, and doubts grew louder. Still, the work continued quiet, relentless, and stubborn. Then the desert began to change, laughed at by the world. When news first broke that China was burying straw and planting trees in its deserts, many rolled their eyes. Environmentalists warned it would fail. Scientists called it wasteful, and critics mocked the idea of growing forests in sand. But while the world laughed, China was facing a deeper danger. Desertification, the collapse of fertile land into dry, lifeless ground. By the late 20th century, it had become a national emergency, threatening food security and survival across huge regions. After 1949, population growth and industrialization drove heavier land use. Overgrazing, aggressive deforestation, and unsustainable farming stripped away protective vegetation. With the land exposed, strong northern winds carried off the topsoil that sustained life. By the early 2000s, more than 2.6 million square kilometers, over 27% of China's landmass, was affected, especially in northern and northwestern regions like Inner Mongolia, Gansu, Ningxia, and Xinjiang. Grasslands and farmland were turning into barren sand. The threat felt most intense around the Taklamakan Desert, the Sea of Death. Already one of the world's largest sandy deserts, it continued expanding, pushing eastward, threatening infrastructure, and fueling sandstorms that choked cities such as Beijing and Tianjin. In 2006 alone, China recorded 17 major sandstorms, with dust clouds reaching South Korea and Japan, and in some cases, even the U.S. West Coast. The human toll was enormous. Around 400 million people lived in or near desertified zones. Crops failed, wells ran dry, and villages were displaced. Communities in Hebei and Inner Mongolia were forced to relocate, creating government-acknowledged ecological migrants. People whose homes became unlivable due to environmental collapse. For a rising global power, this was also political. Environmental breakdown threatened lives, livelihoods, and credibility. China needed more than temporary fixes. It needed a bold project capable of reversing decades of damage. China's ambitious plan unveiled. Out of that crisis came the vision of a green Great Wall, a vast man-made living barrier meant to slow the deserts. In 1978, China launched the 3 North Shelter Forest Program, often called the Great Green Wall. It aimed to plant a massive belt of trees across the arid and semi-arid north, spanning the 3 north regions, northeast, north, and northwest China. The goal was to block the advance of expanding deserts, especially the Gobi and other northern desert systems before they reached denser population centers and productive farmland. Planned as 8 phases over 73 years, 1978 to 2050, it targeted rehabilitation of over 35 million hectares, about 87 million acres. The intended forest zone would stretch roughly 4,500 kilometers long and up to 1,500 kilometers wide, forming a huge arc across China's northern frontier. This was not simply tree planting. It became national mobilization, combining central planning with local participation. Local governments received mandates to plant and protect forests, while national policies offered incentives. Programs such as Grain for Green compensated farmers for returning eroded farmland to forest or grassland. Citizens were encouraged, and sometimes required, to meet planting quotas through schools, workplaces, and the military. In 1981, China created National Tree Planting Day on March 12, turning afforestation into a patriotic act. As the effort matured, China invested in research, monitoring, and satellite-based tracking to measure forest health, survival rates, and ecological impact. Species selection became critical. Irrigation systems were tested and revised, and later phases introduced tools like straw checkerboards and soil conditioners. The strategy also broadened beyond forests, adding agroforestry, grassland restoration, shrub zones, and desert-resistant crops, aiming for resilience instead of monoculture fragility. By the early 2000s, aerial imagery began to show patches of green in places once considered hopeless. Even with high failure rates in some areas, the campaign persisted slowly, steadily, and with growing national pride, despite the world continuing to view it as naive and doomed. The technical execution begins. While critics dismissed the dream, thousands of workers, engineers, and volunteers went into the desert. Early progress depended less on high-tech solutions and more on persistence and practical methods that could survive brutal conditions. One of the most effective tools was the straw checkerboard technique, developed by Chinese desert researchers in the 1970s. Bundles of straw were laid in a grid across dunes, often 1 meter by 1 meter, to slow wind at the surface and stop sand from shifting. The grid helped trap moisture and dust, creating a foundation where hardy plants could take root. The straw came from China's massive rice industry. Each year, over 200 million tons of leftover rice straw, often burned or discarded, became valuable material for stabilization. Workers hauled truckloads into desert zones and spread it by hand, especially near high-risk edges of the Taklamakan, where sand threatened roads, villages, and railways. National Tree Planting Day became a core part of this push. Between 1982 and 2021, an estimated 78.1 billion trees were planted by volunteers. Schools, military units, government offices, and civic groups joined in, making the effort visible and constant. Planting itself was punishing. Workers dug into hard, nutrient-poor ground in extreme heat and cold, often with limited water. Irrigation was improvised with tanker trucks and hand-dug trenches. Because desert soils lacked organic matter, soil amendments, compost, clay, loam, were sometimes added to help retain water. Not all trees survived, but the straw grids began to anchor the dunes. In some pilot zones, sand movement dropped by as much as 99.5%, giving vegetation a chance to hold on. Progress was slow and labor-heavy, built 1 square meter at a time. And as the work continued, the desert pushed back. Struggles, setbacks, and more doubt. Even with early momentum, China's deserts proved harsher than expected. These were not passive landscapes, but shifting systems shaped by wind, drought, and time. In the Taklamakan, Gobi, and other major deserts, rainfall could be as low as 10 millimeters a year, with months or longer without meaningful precipitation. Temperatures swung from scorching 45 degrees Celsius summers to minus 20 degrees Celsius winters. Under those extremes, young saplings often died within a year. Loose, sandy soil could not hold water. Even with irrigation, moisture evaporated quickly or drained away. In the worst-hit regions, survival failures reached 85%, especially in monocultures like poplar or pine that were poorly suited to desert conditions. Sandstorms erased months of work in hours, burying trenches, uprooting seedlings, and scattering straw grids. Logistics and cost added pressure, Moving water, straw, and seedlings into remote zones demanded huge manpower and subsidies. Local governments racing to meet quotas sometimes prioritized quantity over quality, producing inconsistent execution and weak survival tracking. Criticism intensified. International media called it green theater and a waste of funds. Scientists warned that planting non-native species and monocultures could invite pests, disease, and drought vulnerability, and could even worsen soils. Others argued that heavy water used for afforestation could drain groundwater, harming farms and communities. Inside China, some ecologists questioned celebrating planted numbers without measuring survival, and warned of reduced water availability for nearby farmland and river systems. By 2011, even a report from the Chinese Academy of Sciences urged a rethink, calling for a shift from brute force tree planting toward restoring natural ecosystems. The message was clear: the desert could not be conquered by slogans. If China wanted results, it needed smarter methods adapted to place, guided by science and designed for survival. Engineering a solution. Deeper innovation. After years of dead saplings and public doubt, China pivoted. The next phase focused on adaptive techniques, combining ecological knowledge with engineering, transforming the Great Green Wall from a struggling campaign into an evolving system. A key leap was mechanizing straw grid construction. The checkerboards worked, but manual laying was slow and exhausting. Engineers developed automated trench digging and straw laying machines that built grids 4 to 6 times faster than human labor, allowing stabilization at much larger scale. Ecological strategy also changed. China reduced reliance on fragile, fast-growing monocultures like poplar and eucalyptus and moved toward native and desert-adapted species. Planting schemes began to include saxaul, tamarisk, wolfberry, goji, sea buckthorn, and drought-resistant grasses, species better built for long dry periods and better at forming self-sustaining systems. Soil and water methods improved. Researchers tested biochar, microbial inoculants, and compost blends to help desert soils retain water and nutrients. In some zones, small-scale drip irrigation boosted efficiency. In others, mycorrhizal fungi were added to improve root uptake and survival. Engineering expanded beyond planting. The BTU Lanzhou Railway, through a section of desert, used straw checkerboards, windbreak forests, and gravel belts to keep tracks from being buried. Similar approaches supported a high-speed highway through the Taklamakan, once considered unbuildable due to shifting dunes. Vegetation corridors were designed to trap dust, block wind, and reduce soil loss. Monitoring became more precise. Satellite tracking and drone surveys helped measure vegetation health, identify weak spots, and adjust tactics in real time. The goal shifted from forests everywhere to resilient ecosystems shaped to the realities of each desert. What emerged was not brute force, but iteration learning from failure, recalibrating through science, and scaling with determination. The world that once mocked the effort was about to face visible results. 10 years later, they regretted it. A decade after the ridicule, change became undeniable. Deserts once treated as permanent wastelands began showing stability and, in places, renewed life. In 2024, China announced a landmark milestone: completion of a 3,000-kilometer green belt encircling the Taklamakan Desert. Where dunes once threatened to swallow roads, villages, and railways, sand was increasingly anchored by straw grids, native vegetation, and stronger ecosystems. From 2016 to 2020 alone, China converted 21.7 million acres of desert into green land. By 2024, total reforested area since the project began exceeded 30 million hectares, and national forest coverage rose from about 10% in 1949 to over 25%. Regions long battered by dust storms. Inner Mongolia, Ningxia, and parts of Xinjiang reported lower frequency and intensity of sandstorms. Cities once shrouded in seasonal yellow haze saw clearer skies and healthier air. Satellite images that once showed dead lines of plantations began to reveal ribbons of green and straw checker patterns stretching for hundreds of kilometers, protecting farmland, infrastructure, and communities. Infrastructure once predicted to be lost held steady. The BTU Lanzhou Railway remained operational, protected by the same methods once mocked. The highway through the Taklamakan became a working reality, reinforced by gravel barriers and vegetation belts. What had seemed impossible in the early 2000s became visible proof of patience and design. Economic effects followed. Formerly barren regions opened to ecotourism, drawing visitors to see desert forest corridors and sand control infrastructure. In some areas, locals began cultivating goji berries, grapes, and desert-resistant herbs, turning abandoned land into productive zones. Incentives for sustainable farming created jobs, reduced poverty, and brought stability to vulnerable communities. Internationally, environmental organizations and desert-prone nations began paying attention. China was no longer a punchline. It was a reference model for combating desertification through large-scale planning, adaptation, and innovation, a global model of transformation. What began as a domestic experiment grew into a globally recognized example of ecological resilience. From 2000 to 2017, NASA's satellite data showed global green cover rising despite deforestation elsewhere, with China responsible for more than 25% of that increase. The Great Green Wall contributed alongside other afforestation campaigns and broader land management reforms. The shift changed China's narrative from degradation to renewal. As vegetation expanded, carbon sequestration increased, supporting efforts to offset emissions and improve standing in climate discussions. Wind erosion and dust storms declined, helping agricultural yields and easing respiratory health burdens. Reforested areas began forming microhabitats, birds, insects, and small mammals returning as early signs of biodiversity. China's methods also began influencing other desert-prone regions. Countries in Africa's Sahel, Central Asia, and the Middle East studied its approach, low-cost materials like rice straw, community participation through planting holidays, and machine-assisted sand control methods that could be adapted elsewhere. Chinese experts were even invited to collaborate with the African Union's Great Green Wall Initiative, aiming to stretch green land from Senegal to Djibouti. At home, pride surged as images spread of landscapes once lifeless, now holding plant life. One viral line captured the mood. They said it couldn't be done. Look at this. The slogan reflected more than environmental progress. It reflected persistence. Tourism and sustainable agriculture continued to expand, with desert-grown grapes, herbs, and berries reaching domestic and export markets. China's story shows what can happen when policy, local participation, science, and scale converge, and when failure becomes fuel for smarter change. The world laughed when China started burying straw in the desert. A decade later, the laughter faded as sand gave way to green. What do you think about China's green walls? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Epoch Dive for more amazing documentaries.